When I got out of university, I was making around $30,000 a year. About 5 years later, I was making double that. And I didn't do it by starting $1 million business, I didn't win the lottery, and I didn't have some secret investment strategy. I basically did three things over and over again. I built my skills, I built my network, and I took advantage of opportunities when they came up. And what's interesting is that some of the biggest increases in my income didn't come from working at the same company for years and waiting for a massive raise. They came from making strategic career moves. So I want to walk you through exactly how my income went from roughly $30,000 a year after university to around $70,000 a year and beyond. When I finished university, I wasn't making anywhere close to what I make now. I was working two part-time jobs, and combined, I was making around $30,000 a year. And honestly, I wasn't sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to double my salary in 5 years. I was just trying to get started, right? But I knew I needed to build skills and find a full-time career. So I kept working, I kept learning, and I kept improving my skills. And I, of course, started applying for full-time positions. At the same time, I was meeting people and building relationships through these jobs and through different social events. And this is something that ended up being way more important to my career than I initially realized. Because eventually, one of the people I had connected with recommended that I apply for a full-time position at a specific location. So I interviewed, and I eventually got the job, and just like that, my annual income jumped by roughly $20,000. And that's a pretty significant increase when you're starting around $30,000. And that's one of the reasons I think it's important not to get too attached to your starting salary. Your first job out of school isn't necessarily where you're going to stay, right? It's an opportunity to get experience. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to finish university and immediately be making six figures. And sure, while it's possible, that's not the case for probably the vast majority of people, right? So your first job out of university or college, like I said, it's an opportunity to get experience, right? It's an opportunity for you to learn, to build your resume, to meet people, and honestly, to really prove what you're capable of. And that's exactly what I tried to do. So I stayed at this new place for a little under 2 years, and I got a raise that brought my salary up to around $52,000. But the raise wasn't the only thing I gained from that job, right? I was building my resume while I was working there. I was obviously learning as my first full-time job, and I was developing new skills. And once again, simultaneously, I was building my network. And this is where networking really started to pay off for me. One of the connections I had made reached out to me and essentially said, would you be interested in this opportunity that I have? And that wasn't something, I had necessarily gone out looking for, right? And that's one thing that I mentioned to the employer at the current place I was working at was, I obviously enjoy it here. I wasn't, going out looking for other jobs at this point in time. This is something that, somebody approached me about. So someone who knew me thought I might be a good fit for something. So I looked into it. I learned about the position, I went through the process, and eventually I took the job, and my salary jumped another roughly $13,000, which is a huge jump. And again, it wasn't because I found some secret trick, right? It was because I had spent the previous more than just a couple of years becoming more valuable, right? I had experience now, I had skills, I definitely had a stronger resume, and of course also had people who knew me and knew what I could do simply by just working and, talking to people. So I spent about a year in that role and received another raise. And then a little while later on, I was making around, I think it was just under $70,000 a year at that point in time. So let's look at the progression. I started at around $30,000. Then my first full-time role brought me to roughly $50,000. Then another opportunity came up, and that brought me to around $65,000. And then another raise took me to just under $70,000. And eventually, only really a few years into my career at that point, I was approached about another opportunity and I decided to take that. And that gave me another increase of a few $1,000s. So in roughly 5 years after university, which that time flew by and it even feels like it's been a long time since then, since all this has happened, I had gone from making around $30,000 a year across two part-time jobs to making more than twice that in my career, in my early 20s. Now, I want to make something really clear. You could look at this story and say, oh, so the secret is just job hopping. And I don't think that's the lesson at all. If you jump from job to job every 6 months without actually developing any skills or accomplishing anything, you're probably not going to build a great career and it might actually look bad on your resume. The reason these opportunities worked for me is because I was building something in between them, right? Every job gave me more experience, new skills. I was meeting people, so I was expanding my network. Every project gave me something that I could add to my resume or to my LinkedIn. So when the next opportunity came along, I was more valuable than I was the previous time. And that's the part that I think that gets overlooked. don't just chase a higher salary. You actually have to become someone who deserves that higher salary. And that's why one of the biggest things I focused on was developing my skills, right? Your employer doesn't really care how badly you want to make more money. In fact, they probably don't really care at all. They care about what you can do for them, right? So if you want to increase your income, ask yourself, what skills would make me more valuable to an employer? What can I learn? What can I become really good at? What responsibilities can I take on? What problems can I solve? And you don't necessarily need to go back to school every time you want to learn something. I've learned an enormous amount outside of an actual formal education, right? You can learn through YouTube, take courses, reading books is great. You can find mentors. I've been fortunate enough to have multiple great mentors throughout my career. You can practice, you can work on personal projects too. So, the goal is really to become more capable. And then there's networking. I think people sometimes hear the word networking and they imagine walking into a room and they're handing out their resume or their business card to 50 strangers, and that is not how I look at it. Networking is actually building genuine relationships, right? Meet people, have conversations, be helpful, keep in touch and remember people. That's super important too. I haven't always been great with names and I'm still working on it, but meeting people, remembering their name, even things about them can be super, super important. And when you meet someone you get along with professionally, don't just disappear, right? Like I said, stay in touch, because some of the biggest opportunities in my career have come from people that I had already built relationships with. And sometimes you don't even know when a relationship is going to pay off, right? And that's why it's important to not burn bridges as well, right? For me, if I'm leaving a workplace, I've been fortunate enough to, like the workplaces and, the people at my work and things like that. But even if you didn't, right, don't burn bridges, because you never know what's going to happen further along in your career. And this is especially important if you are early in your career. The person you meet today might know about an opportunity that comes up 5 years from now, 10 years from now, right? And that's why I think your network is one of the most valuable assets you can build, again, especially early on in your career. And finally, don't be afraid to pursue an opportunity when it comes along, right? Of course, you have to weigh all the options. And, I'm not saying you should quit your job every time someone offers you $5,000 more, right? You have to, of course, look at the entire opportunity, the role, what will you learn? What is the company like? The culture, that's a huge thing. The work-life balance, even things like opportunities for advancement and all these other details, right? But if you've been somewhere for a while and, you're no longer learning or you're underpaid or there's a better opportunity somewhere else, don't be afraid to make a move, right? Your employer isn't responsible for maximizing your income. That's a personal thing, right? You're responsible for that. So if you're graduating from university or college right now and you're looking at your first salary thinking, this isn't anywhere near what I want to make, do not panic, right? Don't panic. Your first salary does not have to be your forever salary, and it won't be, right? I started around $30,000 a year through, building skills, gaining experience, networking, staying connected with people, and really honestly, not being afraid to take opportunities when they came up. I was able to more than double my income in around 5 years. And, I've been working for, obviously past this point, past this story that I'm able to tell you guys, and I'm not done, right? That's the other thing that I want to emphasize. I'm not making this video because I've somehow made it, right? Or I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, this is the maximum I'm going to make. I'm now in my, well, I guess, mid to late 20s, and I'm still building my career, right? I'm still learning. I'm still trying to increase my income. And, I'm still looking for opportunities to become better at what I do for sure. So if you're early in your career, don't obsess over where you are today, right? Focus on becoming more valuable. Build your skills, build these relationships within your network, build the experience, and when an opportunity comes along, be ready to take it or be ready to at least consider it and review all the details, right? Because your first salary, again, is really just a starting point, and there is so much ahead for you, especially if you're working hard on yourself and your career. So that's it for today's video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.